Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mohanad Maarouf. I'm a holder of a Spanish passport, but I reside in Turkey. Actually, I think there's a better way to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Mohanad Maarouf. I originate from Palestine. I'm a holder of a Spanish passport, and I currently reside in Turkey. It's quite a complex situation, but I'm going to try and tell you why. Where I come from, Palestine, we have a very famous saying. That saying goes, everyone has a nation to live in, except us. Our nation lives within us. It is this that I want to talk about. I want to talk about how my nation lives within me, and why that is detrimental to my existence, and why it has affected me throughout my whole journey. My journey began when I was born in Madrid, Spain, 1996. To me and my family, Spain provided a new culture. It was something new on the horizon. It was something new we all hadn't expected and we all didn't know. So I constantly had to assimilate and integrate myself into this culture. In fact, I remember one of the earliest interactions with this culture that I had. It was at the corner of our house in the nursery. And the first day I went to that nursery, I asked them in Arabic, do you know where my mother's house is? Of course, at the time, I was only 3 years old or something, and I didn't know how to speak Spanish. The nursery was in Spanish. 2 years later, I came out of the nursery speaking fluent Spanish. I like to think of this situation because it reminds me of how I integrated myself and I assimilated into all of these cultures. I've been doing this throughout my whole life, and that moment symbolizes my whole life. When I was 9, I left to go to Turkey. Of course, I thought Turkey would provide me with a culture that was closer to mine, closer to my native Palestinian culture. But I felt like a foreigner, as I always did. Turkey was new. And then I still kept on assimilating and integrating myself to this culture. But then, upon reflection, I began thinking, I could have always assimilated more. I could have said, Mohanad, you haven't integrated yourself. You haven't made yourself a national of these cultures. And I said, there was always something that kept me from doing so. And I soon realized that that thing was Palestine. Of course, as you now understand, Palestine, not just to me, but to every one of us Palestinians, means so much. My father was born in 1946 in northern Palestine, in a place called Akka. It's a very nice port city, and he was born in a village there. My grandparents in 1948, when my father was only 2 years old, had to evacuate and leave everything behind. They left their homes, their lives, their Palestine. They left it completely because they had to run away from the occupation. My father grew up and he learned that he wanted to be a politician for his country. So he became an ambassador. And then the first chance he got to return to Palestine was in 1994 after the Oslo Accords. So he wanted to go back and visit the village. But of course he didn't know much about it. So he went back, and one of the first things he did was visit the village instead of the rest of Palestine. He went there and he looked around. He wanted to feel the experience of coming back home, of reuniting with his country. So he went there and he looked around. He felt unsurprised. He said, there's nothing special here. He said, the trees and the stones and the walls, everything is the same. But he didn't know much about this. So then he decided to bring my grandfather, his father, my grandfather, his father, to Palestine, because he wanted to feel this feeling of coming back home. So 4 years later, he brought my grandfather and his family to Palestine to go and visit the village. And my father watched my grandfather. He wanted to see what he felt. And as my grandfather went into the village, my father described the encounter as if he was fighting with the stones. The space left from the demolishment of our home was occupied by his tears. He was left in tears. He said, "We used to farm there." Surprisingly enough, he found a tree that they had planted still standing. It was very sad for him to let go of home. In the present time, I realized that I've come a long way to learn about my country, even though I don't know much about it. When I was very young, I used to have the image of my father watching television, sitting on the couch. He was always watching the news, of course. And all the voices of the journalists and the reporters were very familiar to me because I kept hearing it all the time. So I would go up to him and say, "Baba, what are you watching?" He would say, "Politics." I kept asking him questions. He'd say the same thing. But now, whenever I ask him anything or whenever I tell him anything, he says, "Go away." He says, "Halaktni ya zalami," which means, "You've made me tired." He's tired of answering my questions because sometimes they may be too complex or they may go too deep into the future to be dealt with. I'd like to think that both him and I have come a long way to say that I've become a better connoisseur of my country. And I think he's proud of it, but he never really mentions it. So, where does this leave me? I always like to go back and reflect. And after all of this moving around the world and assimilating into cultures and integrating myself, I always say, well, what is home to me? It's a very, very complex question that I still can't answer. Because I was born in Spain and then I came to live in Turkey. I don't really have a home, or there's nowhere I consider home. Sometimes when I used to ask my friends, "Where are you going this summer, before summer vacations?" They'd say, "I'm going home." It always startled me whenever they said that, because I wish I could have said, "I'm also going home." But I can't. I hope that one day I can definitely say the same. So now you may be wondering, why? Why do I care about Palestine so much? You're right. I've never lived there. I only went there when I was 1 year old, and I don't recall much. And I've lived my life outside of it. So why does it still matter to me? The answer is very complex. Some people think that nationality is a very simple notion. I think nationality is a very complex notion. It can't be explained quickly. To you, your nationality may be something that you could waive or let go of easily. To me, it's not. You may know Palestine to be just an area of land or a landmass, or maybe you've heard of it in the news. Maybe you've heard about war. Maybe you've heard about struggle. To me, Palestine is not just that. Not just to me, but to all of us. Palestine is our dignity, it's our identity, it's our home. It's what we signify ourselves with. It's what we reflect upon. And you see, my nationality is disputed because there's an occupier in my land. And when that happens, my dignity is hurt, my identity is hurt, my home is hurt. And that's why I say these feelings take over and they embody me. And since Palestine is all these feelings, that's why I tell you, my nation lives within me. It lives within all of us. Olive trees are very important in Palestine. They're everywhere. If you go, you'll always see one. Olives are a very important source of nutrition in Palestine agriculture. So much that it has become a cultural symbol for us, a symbol of our nation. Now every day, olive trees are uprooted from our land, just as we were uprooted. They are uprooted every day, just so my occupier can build homes. So I stand here and I tell everyone, they may uproot however many olive trees they want. They may build however many homes they want. But they will never uproot the olive tree inside of me, inside all of us, inside of inner Palestine. David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of the Israelis, once said about the Palestinian people, "The old will die and the young will forget." Today, I stand before all of you and before all of the followers of that quote and say, I remember. I am here to disprove that quote because I remember and I will never forget. Just as no one will forget. I today stand before you and embody and represent the youth, the generation of people who will be activists and will support the struggle of human rights all across the globe, including our own struggle and our own human rights. Generally, people from the part of the world that I come from attempt to seek the West to find better opportunities to live. They try and find a better life in the West. It's ironic and pretty funny to me that I'm trying to do the opposite. I grew up in the West, I was born in the West, and I don't know my home. And I want to return back. I want to go back to my home. It's always expected that the distance from one to their home will make them grow distant from it and will make them drift apart from it. But for me, on the contrary, it's done the opposite. My distance from my home has only brought me closer to, and I hope it continues to. Thank you very much.